Welcome to the Sunday Times Politics Weekly, where with our guests, we explore the big political issues of the moment. I'm Mike Siluma, and thanks for joining us. South Africa's position in the Israel-Hamas war has further strained relations between Pretoria and the Israeli government, culminating this week in the withdrawal of our country's diplomats from Israel. In this episode of the Sunday Times Politics Weekly, we explore the issues at the heart of the disagreement between our two countries and why South Africa is supporting the cause of the Palestinians. But first, let's hear International Relations and Cooperations Minister Naledi Pandor putting forward South Africa's case in Parliament this week.
The people of Palestine are denied the right to exist as human beings. They're denied the right to enjoy the freedoms and the rights we so love as South Africans, the rights and freedoms we fought so hard for, the rights and freedoms we united on as a diverse South African people. Today, some of us in this house believe these rights belong to some and not to others. That is not the South African way. We believe all human beings enjoy the right to exist in freedom, enjoying justice and humanity.
That there is International Relations and Cooperation Minister Naledi Pandor in Parliament. But before we go further, let's welcome our guests this time, who are Garth le Pere, who is a visiting professor at the University of Pretoria. He's also a widely published author on a whole lot of political subjects, as well as Lubna Nadvi, who teaches politics at the University of KwaZulu-Natal.
You asked Mr. Ramaphosa to sit down first. I'm standing.
Now I warn you.
I need to put on my big girl panties and keep going.
You can't have two speakers standing at the same time.
Security services of the Republic of South Africa, you may intervene.
There's been several attempts on my life.
Lower that hand on
not allowed.
The president is accused of serious crimes.
I know I'm going to become the president of this country.
You are going to be the president.
I am going to be the president
of South Africa.
Of South Africa. There's no confusion.
Of South Africa.
I will cancel race.
Corrupt people do not eat alone. They have a spider web.
I'm there. I can lead them. I'm ready to be the president of this country.
I now suspend the proceedings. I have warned you.
Hey, welcome to the both of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Lubna, let us start with you. Naledi Pandor in Parliament was alluding to a connection between the struggle that was fought in South Africa and what is happening in Palestine. You know, to say the rights are inseparable. That what they are fighting for is what is what South Africans were fighting for. You know, in overthrowing apartheid. But just to go back, because not all of us. I mean, this is a long drawn conflict that has been going on, and some of the linkages would have happened before 1994, maybe before half of the people listening to us were born even. You know, so what is the historical relationship between the ANC and by extension our government and the Palestinians?
The history and the relationship goes back a long way. We would be aware that the sort of former Nelson Mandela and the late Yasser Arafat were very close. Obviously, both of them were icons of their particular struggles. And, they, of course, supported each other in terms of the individual kind of political struggles that both were going through. And we know that South Africa has historically supported the Palestinian right to political self-determination. And the Palestinians were very much in support of our anti-apartheid struggle when we were going through it. And of course, because, what has been happening in Israel is very clearly, described as apartheid. It's been sort of, clearly indicated by various international organizations like Amnesty International and so on, that what is happening in Israel at the moment, or what Israel is subjecting the Palestinians to, is apartheid. And of course, we as South Africans who have, been through the apartheid, stage and have fought it, we understand it very clearly. But also many people have said that what Palestinians are going through is far worse than what we as South Africans went through during our days of apartheid. But also beyond that, I mean, the connections are, those of, apart from revolutionary struggle, it is also bonds of, freedom and the values that both societies share. So the connection is really between South Africans and Palestinians. But of course, it exists at the level of governments or the sort of state level. The ANC is historically very close to the Palestinians, and of course, the sort of Palestine Liberation Organization. Recently, the South African government and the ANC have also been meeting with Hamas as a sort of player or a political entity that governs the Gaza Strip. So you see the historical relationships being there for a very long time, but of course in more recent times, the relationship is strengthened because of, the South African government has very clearly taken a side supporting the Palestinians and of course opposing the genocide that is playing itself out, that Israel is subjecting the Palestinians to.
Yeah. Garth, I'd like for you to come in here, because I think a lot of us are aware or have been aware of the tensions, if you like, in Palestine, but I don't think we fully understand the history, the genesis, of what is happening there today. I've seen some commentators describing Israel as a settler state. Now, conventionally, especially from a South African point of view, when we're talking about settlers, we understand settlers to be people who came from somewhere else and then settled in a particular place, and often by force of arms and maybe subjugating the people there. Now, what is the historical context of what we're dealing with now in Palestine from that point of view?
I think, Mike, conceptually, applying the settler colonial label to Israel is quite accurate in my view. In my Sunday Times article, which you published, I start off the article with an anecdote, namely that I was a member of the South African Observer Mission, the elections in Palestine, in the West Bank and Gaza in 2006. And I was assigned Nablus, Jenin, and Tulkarm. And those are three areas of, where Palestinians have quite a large demographic presence, which have been systematically occupied by Israel to the point where, there's a level of social engineering and demographic engineering that forced the Palestinians into de facto enclaves which resemble South African Bantustan. And this is the cold reality of occupation, which is writ large across the West Bank and in Gaza before the blockade, and Israel more or less subcontracting the management and administration of Gaza to Hamas. And let us not forget, in a manner of speaking, that Hamas is a creation of Israel. Hamas very much served an Israeli agenda that was antithetical to a two-state solution. Historically, let us remember that there are some historical references that are quite important. And this goes back to the concept of the Yishuv, right? Yishuv is a Jewish concept which is really profoundly informed by Zionist ideology, which is the Jewish community in the greater Palestine. That's the first concept. The second concept is that of Eretz Israel, greater Israel. So those two concepts essentially do not recognize any claims of the Palestinians to this ancestral land. It's a biblical and a secular claim. And the biblical and the secular claim throughout the history of this conflict, you use 1948 as a marker, has been forged and fought in the crucible of war and dispossession against the Palestinians the point where you essentially see, what resembles a Bantustan, kind of settler colonial arrangement. And I talk about this in a sense that it was horrifying, Mike, see the resemblance to what happened in this country during apartheid, with greater intensity, ferocity, and violence. What I observed as a member of the South African Observer Mission in 2006 in the West Bank was very reminiscent of the kind of social engineering during the apartheid era here in establishing the Bantustans as ethnic and racial enclaves, tribal enclaves, if you will. Except that in the case of the West Bank, this has been done with greater ferocity, intensity, and a higher level of violence that has now, really promoted levels of resistance among the Palestinians that really challenged the hegemony and the domination and the subjugation that they've been subjected to since the founding of Israel in 1948.
And for some of us, it may be confusing, to say you are saying that Hamas is a creation of Israel. It might seem like incongruent, or incongruous that the Israel's sworn enemy is actually its creation. How so?
Well, it's anti-discursive, as it were, because Hamas was really born in the crucible of deep ideological and political divisions within Palestine, right? In the West Bank, there was the PLO as sort of the major representative of the Palestinian people, and through the Oslo Accords, the Palestinian Authority was accepted. Hamas comes from a slightly different ideological orientation, which I think is steeped in what is called political Islam. They won, very important to underscore this, Mike, they won the elections in 2006 in Gaza. Hamas did. So they are a legitimate representative of the people of Gaza. And the elections were also contested by the PLO, but the people overwhelmingly voted for Hamas. And Hamas is a hybrid organization, you see, Mike. It has two characters. The one is a military wing, very much like the ANC. So, there's the military wing that is sort of the equivalent of CISWE. Then it is a political and a social movement. And the political and a social movement, they have done much. All that infrastructure that is now being destroyed in Israeli aerial bombardments, especially the hospital, the welfare services, the schools, of course, with huge amounts of aid that has been used, to really finance the fiscus of Hamas in Gaza. They have been able to do what Israel has not through its blockade, land, sea, and air blockade. And I think this has been something where, the Frankenstein that you have created, de facto, is not marching lockstep into what Israel expects them to do. It has become highly radicalized. It has brought the citizens of Gaza along with its agenda. And it makes a nonsense. And this, I think, is the point of contention between the different forces in Israel, because Hamas does not buy into the state solution. It is a non sequitur, it is a non-starter as far as Hamas is concerned, because the two-state solution more or less became an academic concept, with the demise of the Oslo Accords in 1993. So I think Hamas is looking at a different methodology, a different political kind of approach, dealing with the plight of the Palestinians. And remember, very important to underscore this, Mike, 2.3 million people in a virtually open-air prison. Yeah, Hamas is sort of half the size. If you want to use the comparison, it's half the size of the Kruger Park.
You mean Gaza?
2.3 million people. Sorry, Gaza. Yes. The geographic size of Gaza is about half the size of the Kruger Park, or 3/4 of the size to be generous, with 2.3 million people living cheek to jowl in that high density area.
So,
and this is why you see the level of casualties. This is why you see the level of deaths, arbitrary aerial bombardments, which is so indiscriminate. And this is why it has provoked, international outcries for a ceasefire. The pause is really cynical on the part of Israel, because it simply means that Israel will continue until, in its own thinking and from its own perspective, it has destroyed Hamas completely. That is not going to happen.
Lubna, I'd like for you to come in here. Now, all of these things happen until we get to the decision this week to withdraw our diplomats from Tel Aviv. Well, what is the significance of that? Does it mean that we never want to relate with Israel at all, or is this just a temporary tactical move, or what? How should we read the decision?
Well, there's been a lot of pressure on the South African government to cut diplomatic ties with Israel. So it's something that civil society and the movements have been asking for a very long time. It was not too long ago that the embassy, the South African embassy in Israel, was downgraded to a liaison office. So this recalling of our diplomats back this week is just an extension of that, because we had actually, as the South African government started to downgrade our diplomatic relationship with Israel. So the significance of it is that the government is taking heed of what its own population is saying, but also of what is actually happening around the world. I mean, millions of people have come out on the streets across the world, speaking to their governments, speaking to international organizations like the United Nations and so on, and saying that a genocide is unfolding and it has to stop. And the South African government, although it has delayed its sort of actions, because 10,500 people or more by now have been massacred by Israel in the last just over 4 weeks. So, but it was inevitable that South Africa was going to do this, because it cannot, as a government which fought or as, kind of the ANC as a ruling party now in government, which fought apartheid, cannot actually allow this sort of kind of relationship to continue. I think also in terms of your question of, do we not want to deal with Israel? Israel, is identified as an apartheid state. And so the South African government, or rather the ruling party, the ANC, has taken a very clear position on where it stands with regards to Israel. The South African government, as an entity, has a bit more of a kind of nuanced stance. But of course, this week it has said very clearly that we have to, cut diplomatic ties. But only time will tell how far it's going to go. The real test will come with whether we shut the Israeli embassy down and ask the Israeli ambassador to leave, because that is really cutting diplomatic ties. If we bring our diplomats back, that's just one stage of it. It's just simply saying we don't want South African presence in Israel at all. But really, the South African government has to ask the Israeli ambassador to leave. And that is really the full, process, taking it really to the natural conclusion of cutting diplomatic ties. So whether South Africa would want to continue relations with Israel depends on the role that South Africa would like to play in this entire situation. The government has offered to play something of the mediation role and say, well, we, are there to offer our advice and the experience that we've been through in terms of negotiating through a situation. So I think that the South Africans the government wants to see, a amicable resolution, because I think people will recognize that the civilians living in Israel, the citizens of Israel, are also being impacted. So we need to find a resolution that actually is going to, bring this entire 75-year occupation to an end, so that the civilians on both sides are actually able to, coexist in that region. But what is happening at the moment is a genocide. The Israelis are imposing a genocide on Gaza. And so you have to actually take a very strong stance against Israel. It's been committing war crimes. And so whether South Africa as a government wants to continue having a relationship with an entity like Israel, which has been accused of war crimes and genocide, I think it would, as a government, prefer to not continue that kind of relationship until Israel changes its stance, until there's a ceasefire, and until there's some accountability that Israel is subjected to.
Garth,
you
argued. Could I add a quick footnote to what Lubna has just said?
Yeah.
It's very important to remember that in 1994 the ANC inherited official relations between South Africa and Israel, and President Mandela bent over backwards, to sort of shape a new approach and a different kind of chemistry with Israel, including, by the way, Alfred Nzo, the former foreign minister, going to Tel Aviv to shape a binational, framework, a binational commission, an official, bilateral platform for the two governments to have an open dialogue, but also to cooperate in certain areas of mutual interest. And that is a measure of how far the government then was willing to accommodate in Israel in the teeth of this conflict. And then relations, steadily deteriorated, especially during the Second Intifada, between 2000 and 2005, bring us to this point where, as I argue in my Sunday Times, there is now a moral imperative, to send an unequivocal message that South Africa cannot be part of maintaining, the veneer of official relations with Israel at a time when it is involved in this sort of genocidal tragedy that is unfolding in Gaza.
If we cut relations completely, beyond just recalling our diplomatic staff, what role would then be left for South Africa, do you think, Garth, in terms of trying to facilitate a resolution? Or do we simply walk away from the wreckage and leave it to the UN or others to resolve?
Let us understand the essence of diplomacy. Essence of diplomacy is reciprocity, right? Where the two countries on the basis of partnership find each other through mutual interest, the articulation of mutual interest. Mutual interest between South Africa and Israel has irreparably broken down because of South Africa's principal stance on the question of Palestine. That's the first thing. Second thing is how South Africa has kept this issue alive in international fora, particularly in the United Nations, much to the chagrin of Israel. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the moral imperative outweighs the pragmatism of maintaining official relations with Israel. It's very important to, recognize that, and if I may be academic here, you cannot get into a kind of moral relativism, because human rights, questions of self-determination, questions of the rights of people to exist in peace and prosperity, those are absolute rights. There is a long tradition from the times of Plato and Hegel, right up to recent thinkers like Nozick, that really advance the concept that human vulnerability wherever it takes place must be a primary concern, and the humanity that binds us, as communities of faith, regardless of background, religion, and culture, is what is of primary concern. Here, the Palestinians have been denied, the essential rights to self-determination in a way, Mike, that is really unprecedented in terms of the annals of human conflict and war.
Lubna, I just want to ask you, I know we can't read into the mind of Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, as to what's his end game. But given the trajectory, that Israel is on at the moment, when the dust settles, what do you think we will be left with in Gaza? Will there still be an entity called Gaza, or will it be just ruins, basically?
Well, the way that, the aerial bombardment is happening and the daily attacks that, the people of Gaza are having to deal with, it appears that, Netanyahu and his team are looking to basically flatten Gaza and completely obliterate it. I mean, they asked the citizens who were in the north of Gaza to evacuate and to go further down south, so that they would be safe. But that was, a sort of a strange situation when in the south of Gaza, the Israelis were bombing the people who had moved there, and while trying to evacuate and move further south, they were killed on the way. So, the Israeli regime cannot be trusted at all. It's very clear, because even if it says go here or go there, you'll be safe, that this is not the case. The citizens take cover and refuge in hospitals, in school buildings, in the United Nations buildings, UNRWA facilities, and so on, but they are not safe. So if you are asking what is going on in Netanyahu's mind, I think he's just looking to basically destroy Gaza completely. There's been all of this talk recently of and speculation, but I'll mention it, that their end goal is to get rid of all the Palestinians in Gaza, so that
and take them where?
Well, I think that trying to push them out of Gaza into Egypt, and try to get them out, because apparently there has been gas deposits that have been discovered, or gas reserves, near Gaza. But again, I think that those are all, areas of speculation.
Yeah.
The story is emerging that this is really the real objective for the Israelis to take over the Gaza Strip again, because they moved out in 2005, even though they were controlling the ASC and land, entry and exits of the Gaza Strip. But now it seems like they want to go in again, take over the place, and basically get rid of all the Palestinians. But 2.3 million Palestinians, and now more than 10.5 to almost 11,000 have been killed. That's a lot of people, and you can't just simply, obliterate them or get rid of them. Recently, one of the Israeli officials said that they were looking to drop a nuclear bomb on Gaza, and Israel has nuclear capacity, and Netanyahu suspended this particular official. But I think that, Netanyahu, quite frankly, is just, playing games, because the way in which he is proceeding, he is looking to actually completely destroy Gaza, leaving no Palestinians whatsoever. And unfortunately, the scenario as it looks like, but you can't just kill 2.2 million people, and not have consequences. It's just not done.
Garth, I just to change tack a bit, I've looked everywhere, for any intervention by the African Union, and I'm battling, to understand where it stands on all of this. Have you got an idea of whether the continental body is engaging with this matter in any shape or form?
Well, Mike, I mean, not in the current context of this war, but there has been quite a controversial topic in the corridors of the African Union, which was to admit Israel as an observer. And there were many African countries that were in favor of that. And guess who stood up to it? Who was the sort of the lone voice of opposition? It was South Africa, in the person of our foreign minister, Naledi Pandor. And this is a measure of, I think, the extent to which Israel has engaged in a very aggressive charm offensive across the continent. In a sense, winning friends and influencing people. And, it's very important to remember that, Israel has the capacity and it has the wherewithal and the resources to offer kinds of aid that is very attractive to some African countries. I've been to Israel, and some of the things that you observe there, are quite impressive. There's no two ways about it. Turning a desert into fertile agricultural land, the ability to, from a very low base, develop very sort of high-tech products, a very literate and highly skilled, secular population, and so on and so forth. So they're able to offer African countries, including, by the way, military and security kind of support. I won't mention countries, but there are some countries in Africa where Israel essentially manages the entire security apparatus, of certain regimes.
So it's unlikely. It's unlikely that I'm saying that. Sorry to interrupt you. We're almost out of time. But so you're saying it's unlikely that we will see an African Union response to the crisis.
The problem is that, remember, the African Union is a union of member states. Musa Faki Mohammed cannot take a position on his own. He was roundly rebuked by South Africa in particular for unilaterally offering observer status to Israel at the African Union without consultation with the 55 member states. So without that consensus, I don't think, and given the deep divisions that exist within the African Union vis-a-vis Israel, it seems that the African Union will not put out any statement on this matter. I doubt it.
Now, Lubna, the last word to you. Garth doubts that the African Union will take a clear stand, on the Palestinian question as things stand now. Now, our minister Pandor, has alluded to taking Israel to the International Criminal Court. Do you think that is just bluffing? Do you think that that's an option? Can you see the ICC intervening, in the way that it has intervened in other places, as in Ukraine, for example?
Well, I think that is a really, brave and very courageous thing for the foreign minister to have done, because, obviously she would come under a lot of criticism for it. But obviously she has the blessing of the government behind her in order to do that. And there have been other attempts internationally to try and get Israel to the ICC and to, hold it accountable for war crimes and so on, which have not been successful. Because, Israel has the protection of the United States, many countries in Europe, and it seems as if the international community is absolutely, hamstrung on multiple levels to hold Israel accountable. But I think that South Africa's move and the stance that Naledi Pandor has taken is really important, because to call what Israel is doing war crimes is firstly, saying what it is, and then to take the steps that exist in the international community to hold someone who is guilty of war crimes accountable is important. So yes, I think that it is possible. And if the South African civil society has anything to do with it, which it will certainly speak out on, that it will be behind Naledi Pandor and the government to take Israel to the ICC and to subject it to obviously being held accountable. So I think I do see that as a possibility. I mean, if you look at previous tribunals that have been held, for example, in the aftermath of what happened in Germany, the sort of Nazis were held accountable for war crimes, and of course subsequent tribunals held, the more recent ones in Rwanda and so on. You find that even though it takes a long time, but the perpetrators do get held accountable. And that is what we as, freedom-loving, justice-loving people have to hold on to, that inevitably justice has to actually prevail. And sadly, it's taken very long in the case of the Palestinians, 75 years and more. But I do think it will happen. And I think it's a case of us just, staying the course and supporting the foreign minister and the government to make sure it happens, and providing whatever, support is required to make sure that Israel is held accountable. So I do see it happening. And I think that also, to be quite bold, I think that the occupation will end. And that is what I think the international community, the ones that are supporting Palestine, are certainly asking for. So yes, I know it's a very positive prognosis, but I do see these things happening eventually.
Well, we've just about run out of time, and that's where we will wrap it up on the Sunday Times Politics Weekly for this week. Let's thank our guests, Garth le Pere, who's an author and visiting professor at the University of Pretoria, as well as Lubna Nadvi, who teaches politics at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. We appreciate your time, both of you. I'm Mike Siluma. Until next time, do stay safe, stay blessed, and let's do good for our country.